There is a tablet in a museum tray that does not read like anything else in the collection around it. It sat for decades beside hymns and king lists and temple receipts, cataloged, numbered, and never fully translated. The clay split along one edge a long time ago. The wedges on the left side cut sharp and deep, the way they look when the stylus was new and the scribe pressed hard. On the right, the surface wore soft, where centuries of handling rubbed the signs down to shadows. It weighs about 4 pounds. It smells, if you could get close enough, of dust and river silt and the particular stillness of a drawer that has not been opened in years. What sits on that tablet is not a hymn, not a prayer, not a record of grain delivered to a temple, or the name of a king who ruled for 43,000 years. It is a list, items, set in order, written in a grammatical construction that Sumerologists recognize immediately and that most people outside the field have never heard described. Conditional statements. If this, then this. If the rivers do a thing the text specifies. If the sky behaves a certain way at a season when it should not. If certain animals move in a direction the scribe names and does not explain. The list is not vague. That is what stopped the first reader who looked at it carefully. This does not bend the way prophecy bends. It is particular in the way that only someone who expected the list to be used would bother being particular. Not a warning, not a vision, a diagnostic. Written by a man who believed that someone, a very long time after him, would need to sit down and check the items one by one. Behind the famous texts, Gilgamesh, the flood account, the Sumerian king list, filling drawer after drawer at the British Museum, at the Penn Museum in Philadelphia, at the Institute for the Study of Ancient Cultures in Chicago, there are thousands of tablets belonging to a genre most people have never heard named. Omen lists, sign lists, diagnostic catalogs, texts that do not tell stories, texts that watch, and among them, one that watches for something specific, something the scribe understood well enough to describe in physical terms, season by season, sign by sign, pressed into clay so it would survive everything between his hand and whoever opened the drawer. The first column was translated. The second column, the one with the final entries, never was. Not because it could not be read, because no one continued. The Mesopotamians were the first people we know of who wrote down what they saw in the sky and asked what it meant. Not the Greeks, not the Egyptians. The scribes of Babylon and Nippur and Assur, working in the second and first millennia before the Common Era, produced an enormous body of literature dedicated to reading the future from the present, not through ecstasy, through observation, written down, checked against outcomes, and revised. Samuel Noah Kramer, who spent his career at the Penn Museum in Philadelphia and translated more Sumerian literature than any single person before or since, called it the most systematic attempt in the ancient world to read the future from the present. The genre is called the Omen series, and the largest surviving example runs to about 70 tablets. It covers the moon, the sun, the clouds, animal births, the direction of wind at particular times of year. Each entry follows the same structure. If this is observed, then this will follow. That structure matters. It is not poetry. It is a machine for matching what you see to what it means. And the Mesopotamians built it with a patience that has no equivalent in any other ancient literature. They kept these lists for centuries, copied them, corrected them, added entries and struck others. In the scribal schools of Nippur and Babylon, students learned the Omen series the way a medical student learns anatomy, by hand, by repetition, tablet after tablet, until the patterns lived in muscle memory. The tradition runs from the Old Babylonian period, roughly 2,000 years before the Common Era, through the fall of Babylon to Cyrus in 539. More than 1,000 years of diagnostic observation, pressed into clay, stored in archives that smelled of damp brick and lamp oil and the silence of rooms where no one spoke above a whisper. Now here is where this tablet pulls away from the rest. The standard omen list watches for things that happen on a human scale. A king will lose a battle. A harvest will fail. The entries answer questions someone alive at the time would ask. But the list on this tablet does not answer a question like that. The conditional statements point somewhere further out, and the grammar tells you so before the content does. Why conditional grammar for this subject? We will come back to that. First, the grammar itself. In Sumerian and in the Akkadian that borrowed the system, a determinative is a sign placed before or after a word to tell the reader what category the word belongs to. A determinative for a god, a determinative for a city, a determinative for wood or stone or metal. The reader sees the marker and knows what kind of thing is coming before the word arrives. On this tablet, the determinatives do something unusual. The signs that describe what to watch for carry markers associated with physical phenomena: sky, water, earth, animal movement. But the signs that describe what follows carry a determinative that in other texts marks beings, not human beings, not animals. The category the scribes used when they referred to those who came before, those who stand above, those the later tradition would call by names the viewer already knows. That pairing, a physical sign matched to the presence of a being, does not appear in the standard omen lists. In the standard lists, the consequence of a sign is a human event. Here the consequence is not an event, it is a presence. And the scribe wrote it in grammar that does not predict. It diagnoses. A conditional statement in Sumerian is not the same as a conditional in English. The construction used on this tablet belongs to a class that Assyriologists describe as diagnostic rather than predictive. A predictive conditional says something might happen. A diagnostic conditional says something is already happening and the observation confirms it. The difference between "if you see smoke, there may be fire," and "if you see smoke, the fire has started." Every entry on this tablet uses the diagnostic form. Every one. Whoever wrote this was not speculating about what might come. He was telling the reader how to recognize what had already begun. Not a priest advising a king. A man writing a field manual for someone he cannot see, in a time he cannot reach, choosing the grammatical form that says, when you read this, it will not be theoretical. And the worst part of this has not come up yet, because the signs themselves are physical. One entry describes a behavior of rivers, not flooding, which the Mesopotamians understood and recorded in dozens of texts. A different behavior. A movement the text calls backward, using a sign that in other contexts means returning or reversing. A river moving in a direction it should not, at a time of year the text specifies. The scribe did not leave room for interpretation. Another entry describes the sky, not the stars, not the moon. Something about the color of the sky at a particular time. The word used appears in other texts as a description of metal. A sky the color of unworked copper, not the orange of a sunset, but something greener. A color the scribe placed at a season when the sky should look nothing like that. A third entry describes birds, not the flight of birds, which omen texts cover across the ancient world. The entry names a direction, birds moving toward a specific cardinal point, at a time when that movement contradicts seasonal migration. He did not write, "the birds fly strangely." He wrote where they go and when. The detail a man gives when he believes the reader will need to walk outside and look. The list does not describe disasters, it describes wrongness. Small, physical, checkable wrongness. Rivers reversing. A sky the wrong color. Animals that break a pattern the scribe assumed the reader would know. And it says, when you see these, something is present that was not present before. And here the official account starts coming apart at the seams. Because there is a rational explanation, and it deserves to stand. Omen lists served a practical function. Scribes compiled these texts to advise kings and temples. Many entries were revised over centuries as observations were checked. A tablet that lists unusual physical signs and links them to a divine presence fits inside the genre. Researchers have argued that many texts were compiled from older sources, sometimes carelessly. A list that feels unified may reflect a compiler's choice as much as a scribe's vision. The diagnostic grammar may have been standardized after the fact. According to the surviving literature, these possibilities are real. And yet one thing does not settle neatly. The signs on this tablet are not indexed to human events. Every standard omen list ends with a consequence that touches human life. A king falls. A wall breaks. This tablet ends its entries with a consequence that belongs to a different category, marked by a different determinative, written in grammar that says what is already underway. The rational explanation accounts for the genre. It accounts for the grammar. It does not fully account for the direction the list points. The list does not point at the king or the city. It points at something behind them, and the effort to explain that stalled in the same place the translation did. The tablet sat in its tray. For how long exactly is difficult to say. The major collections hold tens of thousands of cuneiform tablets. Many were excavated in the 19th century, catalogued in the early 20th, and have not been re-examined since. Irving Finkel at the British Museum, who has done more than almost anyone alive to bring attention to untranslated holdings, has spoken publicly about the scale of the problem. Tens of thousands of tablets, a handful of qualified readers, funding that arrives for specific projects and disappears when the project ends. A text that does not fit a current research question goes back in the drawer. Not because someone decided it should be hidden, because no one had time. And yet the effect is the same. A text that describes a diagnostic checklist for the return of beings, the scribe considered real, sits in a climate-controlled room, and the second column, the one where the list reaches its final entries, sits unread. Not because the signs resist translation, because the project moved on to something else, and no one came back. That is the kind of burial that does not require intent. The kind that happens when the material is too vast, and the readers are too few, and the questions that drive the funding do not touch the text in tray number 4 on a shelf. No one has opened since the 1980s. The drawer slides open on metal runners that have not been oiled in a long time. The tray sits under fluorescent light. The clay looks the same as it looked the day the excavator wrapped it in cotton and packed it into a crate. 4,000 years between the scribe's hand and the overhead hum of a storage room an Athi scribe could not have imagined, and we still do not know what the second column says. The grammatical question has an answer, or the beginning of one. Researchers who have worked on the diagnostic omen tradition have noted that the diagnostic conditional form appears most consistently in texts dealing with medical practice. If the patient's skin does this, if the fever rises at this hour, the form matches the function, the healer observes, the text tells him what the observation means. What this tablet does is borrow the medical form for something that is not medical. The structure is the same. If this is observed, then this is present. But the patient is not a body. The patient is the world. And the signs are not symptoms of a disease. They are symptoms of a presence. The grammar treats the return of those beings the way a medical text treats a condition, as something already active by the time the signs are visible. That borrowing raises a question no one has cleanly answered. Why would a scribe use medical diagnostic grammar for a cosmological subject? The genres are separate, the training is separate, and yet this tablet crosses from one to the other without hesitation, as though the scribe understood that what he described was not a matter of reading the sky, it was a matter of reading a condition. And that reframing is what makes the last sign on the list so difficult to set aside. The entries build in sequence: rivers, sky, animals, each one physical, each one checkable. The pattern suggests a progression, not random observations, a cascade. One follows another, The way symptoms in a medical text follow a sequence that tells the healer how far the condition has advanced. The last readable entry on the first column, before the break, before the second column begins, describes a sound. Not thunder, not wind, not the grinding of stone that appears in earthquake omens. A sound the text names with a sign that in other contexts means the voice of something that is not seen. A sound without a visible source, heard at night, at a specific season, the scribe marks with care. After the rivers and the sky and the birds have already done what the list says they will do, after all the physical signs have been checked and confirmed, then the sound, the last item before the column runs out of room, and the scribe turns the tablet and begins again on the other side. The scribe gave the sound a determinative, the same determinative that marks every consequence on this tablet, the one reserved for beings. And then the column ends, and the second column, where the list reaches its conclusion, sits in the same tray, in the same drawer, readable, unread. The project that brought the tablet to attention published the first column and moved on. The second column was noted, filed, left for the next researcher who might ask the right question. No one has. And whoever the scribe wrote it for has not arrived yet. Out of everything we went through tonight, there is one thing that stays. Not the signs, not the grammar, not the genre or the tradition. One thing. The scribe chose clay. He could have written on anything available to him. He chose the material that survives fire, that survives the river rising over the city wall, that survives the sack of the city and the burning of the archive, and the silence that follows when a language dies and no one remembers how to read the signs. He chose clay because he believed what he wrote would be needed, and he believed the interval would be long enough to destroy anything less durable than earth pressed into earth and baked until it rang like stone. He did not write a prayer. He did not write a warning. He wrote a checklist. Items in order. Conditions to match against what the reader sees. The clearest, quietest, most practical form of belief there is. Not that someone would find it, but that someone would need it. And whatever you believe about who the Anunnaki were, gods, metaphors, kings with longer titles than their reigns deserved, or something else the Sumerians described in language we have not finished translating, the scribe believed they were real enough to merit a diagnostic, real enough to press into clay. Next week we go deeper, into the second column of that list, the one that does not describe what happens in the sky or the rivers, but what happens to people. The signs the scribe said would come last. If you want to be here when we open that, stay with us. One story a week that did not fit the official version. And write to me below the video, that moment when the scribe chose clay, when he pressed his list into something fireproof, instead of writing it on skin or wood. What do you think he knew about what was coming? What would you put into clay if you believed someone 1,000 years from now would need to read it? I read them. That second column sits in the same tray, same drawer, same room. The catalog number is 1 digit away from the tablet the field already published. Nobody has translated it all the way through. The checklist is not finished, the scribe was not done, and the column is still waiting for the reader he wrote it for.